because you're absolutely right. You ask anyone who's gone through a divorce, anyone who's gone through a custody battle, somebody on one side is going to tell you, this is all about money. It's my attorneys just wants to drag this out because I'm going to keep getting billed and billed and billed. It is just it's one of the biggest scams that goes on in the country every day, every year. Hey, Tom Lemons here. Get real with another episode with some really special guests today. I've got a couple of fellow journalists from around the country. One here in Florida and one up in the Chicago area. I've got Michael Volpe from Chicago, and I got Rich Luthmann down in Lee County or Fort Myers area. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good.
Doing great.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on today. I've known these guys. I've known Michael the longest and just getting to know Rich, but they're both, again, like I said, fellow independent journalists, investigative journalists, done a lot of the same type of work that my audience locally has watched me do over the years. And, that's what I want to talk to them about today is the importance of independent journalism, that we need to preserve that in the United States because a lot of the mainstream media and the corporate-owned media sometimes just doesn't either cover enough or they don't cover the things that people really want to know. So let me get into the introduction first. Michael, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let my audience know who you are.
All right. My name is Michael Volpe, and I write at michaelvolpe.substack.com. And so I got into journalism by accident. I was blogging when I was a mortgage broker when the mortgage market tanked because I had a lot more time. And I discovered a story about Emory University at the time that my brother was going there. And I wrote something about it, and then a whistleblower got a hold of me named Kevin Koritsky. And basically what was happening was Emory University Medical School, which is one of the top 1% in the country. And they do their training at Grady Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in the world, but it's also a hospital for the poor. It's a huge advantage for Emory because it's a boot camp for their med students to be trained at Grady because you're going to see everything and they're coming at you fast and furious. As far as Emory, it's not that advantageous because none of them have money. So what was happening was the professors or the people who were supposed to be overseeing the med students were just leaving them there and take care of the gunshot wound and the guy who comes in with a heart attack. You'll figure it out. No big deal. And Kevin described how he put a stent in on his own. Nobody's watching him. And I'm sure that the person who did it, he didn't realize this is a med student. They also ran some other hospitals, much smaller hospitals, because almost everything is smaller in Grady, but hospitals for wealthy people who paid. So that's where the actual doctors were, and the med students were at Emory. And Kevin got kicked out of med school before I met him. Get kicked out of med school with like 31 days left. It was clearly retaliation. It was naked retaliation, and so that was my entree into the journalism world. And so I've always it was an investigative piece. So that's how I became an investigative journalist. And I started doing a lot of whistleblowers because Kevin was a whistleblower and initially it was actually all like medical whistleblowers. I did a lot of stuff with like the medical boards and their kinds of corruption. And it just continued to evolve. And over the last 10 years, it's a lot of court stuff. And I don't know if I call a litigant a whistleblower, but I guess if you do, they're my whistleblowers. So people who have been wrongfully convicted, had a child custody case that was bad, any other civil case, probate. I do not as much as on child custody, but a lot on guardianship abuse, which is a huge problem. And all of these are global problems. And I've talked to people throughout the world. There are guardianship abuses in Canada, Japan, Australia, in the same way there are guardianship abuses here. There are child custody abuses in England, Canada, Australia, Israel, Italy, in much the same way. And really, there's very little difference. We're more transparent than most, even though we're not that transparent. But in other countries, you can do almost nothing as far as some of those things based on their like very archaic privacy laws. I did a story out of Australia, and I got threatened by their version of the Attorney General's office, suggesting I might be charged, but I figured I probably wouldn't be, but the people I was speaking to would be, because there was very little they could actually say about their criminal custody case in Australia. So that's a difference. But in terms of the way the laws work and the way they're applied, very similar. So these are all global issues that that I'm working on.
Well, I can tell you, I agree with you on the transparency is just not as strong in other countries. I get, one example. I was just traveling to Ukraine. I stopped in Frankfurt in Germany, and I saw some scuffle going on in the airport. So I pulled my camera out to try to record it, and boy, I got surrounded by the German police and told, they were pissed off, yelling at me in German. I'm like, yeah, I thought I was going to get hauled away, but I said, oh no, I wasn't.
You can't record in their airports.
I can tell you, they did. I didn't know you couldn't.
They don't like you recording anything in courts. I went to Boise, Idaho in May, and they let you bring your cell phone all throughout. And I saw people talking on their cell phones, not inside the courtroom, but inside the courthouse, in the outside of the courts. No problem. And what I did was I exposed the woman's name is Diane Walker, one of the magistrates. She was closing her courtrooms, and the way I exposed it was there was like a central computer system in the lobby that has everybody's case and time. And so I took a photo of that, and then outside of her court is on paper the docket for her court. And in the central system, they had 4 cases that day. On her piece of paper was empty, so I did a story on it. And Hippler, Judge Stephen Hippler, so he is the head judge in Ada County. He's the one who assigns cases, and he just happened to assign himself the Koberger case. Because I tell people that if you were assigning cases, wouldn't you assign yourself that case? But anyway, he took time out of his day from presiding over the Koberger case to write a strongly worded letter telling me that I could no longer bring my phone into the Ada County court. And look, there's like a bust of some guy who was a big deal there. I took a photo of that and I put that online as well. I think if I had just put that online, no one would have said that a problem with me taking a photo of this guy's bust. The problem was that I exposed Magistrate Walker. But there is a lack of transparency. But as you and I both said, it's much worse in other countries, even though we can still work on it here.
That's true. And I want to bring Richard in on this subject too, but real quick, another short story, like a court issue like you just talked about, and the transparency. When I was producing my documentary and I was walking through the courts, recording people that work there, employees and stuff, boy, they didn't like that. So the chief judge turns around and makes an administrative order that no more cameras are allowed in his courtroom or his court building at all. So, I mean, this is how they retaliate against people like that. And I got a letter like you did threatening me that if I've ever brought a camera in there again, I'd be subject to contempt charges. So it's like, but yeah, let me bring Rich back in here now and hear what we haven't had a chance to hear from him. Rich, what are your thoughts on this issue? And tell us a little bit about what you do down there in Lee County.
Well, first and foremost, I'm down here in Southwest Florida, Naples and Fort Myers area. And I cover a bunch of different verticals. One is with Mike and family court. We talk about that a lot, and there's so much family court nationally that we talk about. So many different issues about transparency and systemic issues, and just big problems that unless you've been involved with family court, kind of fly under the radar. There's also other verticals I cover. I cover all sorts of court stuff. I have a legal background, so cases down here in the Fort Myers Federal Court, in the Middle District of Florida, and some other cases. There's a couple of good ones right now. One's with Judge Judy. She's got a big defamation case down here. And there's another one related to an internet guy named Dinesh Nishirvan, and he's suing a big plastic surgeon down here, and there's a countersuit. So it's a big case. But I cover other stuff all around the country on legal issues. I also have other verticals. Mike will tell you I'm probably the most MAGA person that you'll meet. So I do cover all the great stuff that President Trump has been doing and what his administration has been doing, all the promises made, promises kept. But I also talk about things related to New York as well, because I'm from New York originally, and I was a law chair of the New York State Reform Party, so I know about politics, pretty well. And so I'm from Staten Island originally, so I get a lot of people who are friends from up there calling me up and telling me what's going on. I'm kind of like the person they can talk to because they know me, but I'm not in the game up there anymore. But I'm still a journalist, so I can get things out, and so I get a lot of people calling me strategically, So, but I do a lot of that. And Mike and I together, we do our Unknown podcast once a week. We talk about current events. We talk about some stuff that we cover together, and we'll talk about this with you in a little bit, Tom. A guy named Jeremy Hales, and that's one of the big things we're covering together in cancel culture. But also, we talk about our own stories and all the different stuff that comes across our desks and that we put out on our media.
All right, and Rich, you've got a colorful past. You spent some time in federal prison. What happened?
Well, let's put it this way. Hillary Clinton doesn't love me, and so James Comey came for me, and the rest is history.
Well, they're going after James Comey now, so there you go.
And Tom, I think this will come up on your screen. Can you get that up?
Yep. Let's see what you got here.
All right, and so this is the letter I was referring to. They misspelled the other guy's name. When I was there, I went to court every day with a guy named Mark Escabel. They misspelled his name. But based upon you or someone in your organization, we didn't really have an organization, but that's okay, intentionally having violated the administrative order regarding audio and video recording in the courthouse, as evidenced by the posting on social media a photograph of the notice that such is not permitted. Neither you nor anyone affiliated with your organization will be permitted to film or video any court proceeding until further notice. In addition, you will not be able to permit it to bring in any courtroom a device, including a cell phone, capable of video or audio recording. And so that is the notice that I got from the court. And I want to say there were signs up, but I thought they meant inside the courtroom. But also, there were guards, like the security people. They're more advanced than a security guard, but there were like the sheriff's deputies. Nobody came up to me and said, "Hey, you can't video. You can't photograph this." I wasn't doing it covertly, and as I said, what they didn't like was that what he said, what he referred to the posting of the notice. Was that the photograph of her docket being empty, and there was a notice next to her docket stating that you're not supposed to photograph or videotape. But I was proud of myself. I showed up at 8:20 on a Sunday, and by the following Friday, I had gotten under so many people's skin that I got that notice. So I was pretty happy. I was in and out of Ada County in less than a week, and look how much I accomplished. And I met during my trip, I met with both Republicans, Representative Heather Scott and State Senator Tammy Nichols, and they now chair and co-chair the Idaho Child Custody and Domestic Relations Task Force. And when I was meeting with them, they were still considering it. And so I helped to push that across. And so that state in Arizona formed these committees, we'll call them, where both representatives and senators are part of the committee to examine family court. And I think that's a big deal. That's how far the reform movement has come, that at the same time, there are 2 states that have formed special committees. And there's a couple more states looking at it. I don't want to say until they've announced. Supposedly it's coming soon. So I think this is something that's going to spread. But, I helped to get that task force formed in Idaho. And they've held several hearings, and they're interesting hearings. And they're definitely the people, the politicians on the task forces, they understand the problem, and they have good solutions. The question is, will they be able to whip? If you guys don't know that much, that's when you hear somebody is the whip, it's their job to round up the votes for whatever you have to do. I don't know if they'll be able to whip enough people up. In Idaho, I think the governor is friendly to this. In Arizona, Katie Hobbs is not so friendly, so they're going to have even more trouble. You would have to whip up enough votes to overcome a veto in most cases. But I think
Idaho is a conservative state, correct?
Right, and it's a Republican
okay.
governor. I don't think. I think if they get things through the legislature, he's not going to veto it. Hobbs did veto a bill that they got through the legislature, so there, that's as they say, elections have consequences. That is, consequence. She's not on board with what they're doing. What we interviewed State Senator Mark Fincham, and State Representative Rachel Keschel, who chair and co-chair the committee in Arizona, and they both think they can turn this into an electoral issue and paint her as anti-family, which is not good for. If they can pay her that way, is not good for her because everybody has a family. So they might be able to, they think it'll help get her out of office if she continues to be obstructionist, and we'll see what happens.
Wow.
I've written an article. So I think she's a sadist at the end of the day. And frankly, you said it right. Arizona's got a bunch of Mexicali Marxists that make up that that voting bloc down there. Much different than I know. And so the difference is she has behind her, Katie Hobbs does. She's a former therapist, a former social worker type, and so she's to look out for their billable hours and their fees, as well as the billable hours and fees of the trial lawyers. So she's who feathered her nest. So against any type of reform, God forbid, the golden goose gets plucked in anyway, and it's really shameful because and we mentioned Senator Fincham, Mike did. He went in front of the Senate, the Arizona Senate, and said, "This is a civil rights issue. When you go to a family court in America, anywhere, you have two things that the court should do. They should make a determination on the property and a determination on the custody. We're not in the business of fixing people." And Mike Volpe says it all the time. The family court model is to have an appointment, bring in another appointment, bring in another appointment, bring in another appointment. And after a while, it bankrupts people. And it's a form of extortion. These family courts are telling parents, you do everything that we say. You must do everything that we say, or else you will never see your children ever again. And there's nothing in my mind and to my heart that violates natural law and the relationship between parents and children more than that. And the government should be nowhere near that.
All right. And on that note, can I hold on? I want to get something up because it relates to what he was to what Rich was saying, and hopefully I can figure out how to do this. All right, so this is an example of what Rich is talking about. So this guy, Eddie Engels, they're going to try to put him in jail because he's got an unpaid guardian ad litem bill. And the reason that the guardian ad litem bill is unpaid is because this guardian ad litem has been on this case for a very long time and has drained all of his resources. And it's basically the same dynamic that Rich was talking about. They're trying to fix the family, and you don't need to fix the family. And really, they probably aren't trying to fix the family. The guardian ad litem wants to be on the case to get paid as much as possible, and that's really all that's happening. But this is an example of what Rich is talking about. That's one of the reforms. You got to be able to get rid of this ability to, in a never-ending way, appoint these court appointees. And, Eddie's facing that. And by the way, another thing that we haven't talked about, we got rid of debtor's prison in the 1800s under Andrew Jackson. But for some reason, if you don't pay a debt in family court, you can go to jail. How does that make sense?
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, and people do that with child support. You can go to jail for unpaid child support, even though debtor's prison is not allowed. But it is in family court. Eddie would maybe be in jail. He had a hearing on Monday of this week, and the judge called in sick or something. But the judge couldn't make it, and that's the only reason we don't know if they're going to put him in jail. But he hasn't paid the debt. He doesn't have the money. I don't know what you guys want. You've stuck him. And people should understand, these guardian ad litem, he didn't ask for this debt. This is not where he hired a lawyer and then decided not to pay after he hired a lawyer. No, the judge appointed the guardian ad litem and told him to pay. How is that fair? How is that right? And how does that help his daughter? That's what I
Yeah, how does it help the child? How does it help the family, the divorce? No one gets the money. This is a state. These are state funds that they're running together.
Right.
Let me make a point. Let me make a point on that real quick, because you obviously with your grievance against the guardian ad litem, I've seen the same thing. I have not in personal cases, but I'm saying the guardian ad litem program. You're dealing with people's. Again, their family lives. You're dealing with someone, and then you have a guardian ad litem coming. You don't know what their ideological beliefs are. You don't know what their political beliefs are. You don't know how they feel about men or women in general. Their whatever. You're getting them. This is a person coming in to basically guide a judge's decision on their personal beliefs. I totally disagree with that.
Right. I agree with you. In the guardian ad litem, the job description, you're supposed to be the voice of the child and act in the child's best interest. We know that's the job description of the judge. In fact, the job description of most of these court appointees is the job description of the judge. And I always say, if the guardian ad litem is so smart and knows what's in the best interest of the child, that should be the judge then. Why isn't that the judge? Like the custody evaluator, that's the judge's job, is to evaluate custody. But it's become this free-for-all, and I use this example a lot. If you have a complex, a breach of contract case, the judge can't say, this is really complex, I'm going to appoint a forensic accountant. They don't have that power. They don't have that power in criminal court. They do have that power in probate. With guardianship, they can start appointing people. Those are the only two pieces of court where these judges can do these appointments. I think they should be eliminated entirely. I think Rachel Keschel said she may bring forward a bill where it limits it. I think if it limits it, it's at least a start. And maybe I'm wrong. If the judge is limited to two court appointees and that starts to work, then maybe I'm wrong. And then you have a better system. But the system as it's designed now, everyone who's appointed, their goal is to get someone else appointed. Why? Because if I get you appointed to 5 cases, Tom, and we're both working the system, you owe me. You're going to get me appointed to 5. I won't keep getting you appointed unless you start to appoint me. And so if I've appointed 50 people to 50 different cases, well, guess what? I'm going to get appointed to 50 cases at some point. I'm going to stop appointing these people. And that's the corrupt bargain that everybody makes. And it's this free-for-all that the judges are allowed to have. And if that is stopped or at least significantly curtailed, that solves a lot of problems in family court.
Yeah. Let me bring Rich in. Richard, what's your thoughts on this topic?
There's a difference here, and what they can do in a complex case like you talked about, there's something in the law called a special master. So they can appoint someone who's a special discovery master in big complex cases. And let's say you have a case like Apple versus Microsoft. You may have a dozen special masters that are one general special master appointed. You can have a dozen people helping them, or a person in their law firm or anything else, because of the nature of what you need to get through. But that's warranted. That's warranted in a huge corporate litigation like that, where you have a special master to kind of manage discovery for the court, because the court's incapable of handling that type of work. In the family court, it's different. You're 100% right, because they put these guardian ad litems in as the eyes and ears of the court to help administratively manage the case pro forma in every case. And I guarantee you, in 80 to 90% of the cases, they could bring bring the people together in the room with their lawyers and resolve the case within an hour if they really wanted to. When you put more people in, it creates acrimony and it creates a chance for billing.
Listen, I have a custody case that started at the end of February 2023, and the custody decision was made on November 3rd, 2023. And one of the reasons, that's how long it should take. And it was slowed down based on a few things that I did that slowed it down. It probably could have gotten done in maybe August. And the court was a little bit backed up, so it took a couple of months to get to the final hearing. But going through it, I had a lot of problems with it. But looking back, that's great. 9 months. And one reason, I made sure that there were no one got appointed, because they were the ones who were going to slow it down. So it was a clean case. you start, and I wanted to get to the hearing because that was the only way I was going to see my son, and that was what I was fighting for. And without having all of these court appointees, you get from A to B much quicker than if they're there because they have to do a report. They want to see something else. They want to get somebody else appointed, and that's what drags it out. And it is, I believe, deliberate that they want to drag.
Oh,
it
yes,
because
yes.
this lady, her name is Kuzniar, Pamela Kuzniar, in Eddie's case that we put up on the screen. I think she wanted to drag this out. She wanted to increase the billable hours because this is the way she makes her money. And so I made sure that didn't happen, and look what happened. Very quick, relatively painless. They're all painful, but relatively painless custody case. You get this guardian ad litem and other people appointed, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, I want to make that point, back that up a little bit, because you're absolutely right. You ask anyone who's gone through a divorce, anyone who's gone through a custody battle, somebody on one side is going to tell you, this is all about money. It's my attorneys just wants to drag this out because I'm going to keep getting billed and billed and billed. It is just it's one of the biggest scams that goes on in the country every day, every year. Right. But I want to switch gears real quick because I want to put something up on a screen real quick for you here. It's in more of the political realm. We were talking about politics earlier. Jay Jones, the running for Attorney General in Virginia.
He has to drop out. And that's not the only set. Apparently, this is like his common conversation with his friends. He has to drop out. You're the chief law enforcement. You want to be the chief law enforcement person in Virginia, and you're fantasizing about your opponents dying. But I want to point something out. Rich and I interviewed Brennan, is his last name. He wrote a book defending Aaron Burr. That he believes that Aaron Burr had a bad rap through history. But as you remember, Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in the duel. This is not new. All right. We've had this kind of fiery rhetoric for a very long time. And, in a sense, it's a lot better that this guy put something like this into a text message that he thought was private than two guys go by the willow trees and shoot at each other. We've probably come a long way from where Alexander Hamilton died over, the historian explained it to us, it was like a matter of honor. You called me a liar. I guess, yes, you're right. Being called a liar, the only answer to that is death, I guess. Right. We've always had this. Not my favorite, but one of my favorite presidents is Andrew Jackson. And he was involved in at least a couple duels, maybe depending on who you believe, it's dozens. He was that kind of a guy. But, he was that big. It was that good. It was that good, huh? Yeah. Right. He was born into that kind of a lifestyle. But no, he was a tough guy when handling your gun was the way you proved if you were a tough guy. But Jones, he has to drop out because he has no chance. Now, look, Democrats are going to lose that because a guy dropping out at this late stage, you're not going to replace him with someone's going to win. But, what else can you say except, I know you said it privately. Whatever excuses you come up with, it doesn't matter. You got to drop out. Right. I got to say, you're right. You're absolutely right. And Rich, I want to get your thoughts too, but I want to say this, and we talked about this last week when I was on your show, and was the rhetoric in the country, and how far can you go to stop people from saying some of these things and influencing our younger people to do something violent, and I believe it is causing violence in the country. But I want to get Rich, give us your thoughts on that.
I don't mind them staying in. Frankly, Winsome Sears put out her ad. I think it might have been one of the most effective ads possible, where she had it saying what he was saying, and then he had the gubernatorial candidate saying what she was saying, and then juxtaposing back and forth, and then it says vote Republican, avoid the crazy. I don't mind holding it out there on election day, almost like you would put somebody on the hook and show that, that type of activity has no place in politics. I don't think you should step out. I think you make them run the rest of the race. You don't make them stop, finish the race. You don't finish the race. They come in last place, and then everybody points at you and say, "You're the worst that ever ran this race." And we can point at him forever for that. I kind of, that's the kind of feeling that I have. I feel that you put people on the ballot, right? And once they get on the ballot, it shouldn't be an easy thing to get them off, because that just helps the party machine to give you, Coke and Pepsi. I think it's better that they make the party itself, because this guy's drawn dead. This guy is drawn dead. He's not going to win. Make the party deal with the problem. And I think that's the better issue. And both sides will feel that way. Both sides, the Republicans, same way.
I think that's an interesting thing you mentioned, but you got to pass laws that basically says once a party has picked a candidate, they can't remove him. But with the laws as they are, they can. But
elected specialists, they know what the laws say. The laws say in New York, for example, the only way you get out of off the ballot in New York is through death. Death is one way, or you have to leave the state. You actually have to physically move and take up residence in another state. Okay, it's so hard. Or you get appointed to a judgeship, right? Those are the escape hatches under the election law in most places. They change it a little bit, in some states to make it so the major party holders or the major seats, the statewide seats, can kind of be manipulated a little bit easier. But for most places, those are it. You either have to move out of the political subdivision, you have to die, or you have to get to another office. That's it.
Right. Well, all right. You got to pass the laws.
Right. All right. Well, listen, guys, I have to cut it short right there because we've gone a little bit long. But I do want to. You guys will come back again, I'm sure. Right. All right. Awesome. And I'll join you on your show another time. I hope I can. And but listen, Rich, thank you for coming on this afternoon. And Michael, thank you too. And we're going to have you back again soon, hopefully. But that's all we got. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you at another episode of Get Real.